So imagine you're starting a business, right? But your biggest asset isn't some massive injection of venture capital.
Right. No angel investors swooping in.
Exactly. You don't have a pristine, highly engineered architectural blueprint for your career. You haven't cleared the land or, poured this concrete foundation of seed money to build a shiny brand new skyscraper from scratch.
Which is what we're always told you need to do.
Right. Instead, you're looking at a startup landscape that is entirely upside down. You're taking a space that society has largely forgotten, and you're using your own sheer grit to breathe life back into it. Literally sleeping on a floor mat in an 80-year-old former Japanese military base.
It's just such a wild image, honestly.
It really is. And today, we're opening up a stack of source material that completely redefines what it means to be an entrepreneur. We're doing a deep dive into an in-depth interview transcript that chronicles the life of a Taiwanese founder named Yu-quan.
Yeah, and this is a profound look at resource-constrained innovation.
Totally. And our mission for you, the listener, is to extract the ultimate blueprint of how someone goes from having literally zero capital, like just enough to pay a government registration fee, to building a stable, deeply fulfilling, dual-purpose business.
And doing all of that while completely uprooting their geographic life, too.
Exactly. It's a story that completely defies conventional business logic.
It really does, because we're looking at a journey that operates right at the intersection of, well, geographical arbitrage, historical preservation, and just the sheer psychological resilience required to survive what I call the universal starvation phase of entrepreneurship.
The starvation phase. I love that term, and we're definitely going to dig into that later.
We have to, because this story, it challenges the fundamental ways we view failure.
Right.
And financial resources and even the physical spaces we inhabit on a daily basis. It's all about analyzing how Yu-quan started from zero capital and gradually overcame these massive entrepreneurial challenges.
Yeah, and to give you a sense of the incredible juxtaposition we're dealing with today, we're tracking how a kid from the rainy north of Taiwan who completely bombs a major qualifying exam somehow ends up diving into a tank to feed a giant whale shark in the tropical south.
Which sounds like a movie plot.
Right. It reads like a screenplay. And then he eventually launches a startup with only 5,000 new Taiwan dollars in a historic military village. But, every detail is grounded in a very strategic kind of adaptability.
Yeah, it's not just luck. It's highly intentional, even if it didn't feel like it to him at the time.
So, okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning. Because Yu-quan's origin story is rooted in what society typically labels as a massive failure.
Oh, absolutely. The classic failed exam.
Exactly. He's a kid from the Xinzuan, up in the Taipei area in the north. And he was studying for this crucial exam to upgrade his educational qualifications.
And for anyone unfamiliar with the educational infrastructure in this region, I mean, these exams are not just casual tests.
No, not at all.
They're often viewed as rigid gates that dictate your entire socioeconomic trajectory. The pressure is just immense.
Immense. It's life or death for your career, basically. And he bombs it. He completely messes up the exam.
Which is devastating.
Oh, yeah. In that culture, that usually feels like a door slamming shut permanently. But the sources reveal that this failure was actually what we could call a geographic slingshot.
A geographic slingshot. I like that.
Right, because it forced his placement into a university way down south in Kaohsiung.
And that concept of the geographic slingshot is vital here. Because when we experience a perceived failure in a highly structured environment, the immediate reaction is panic.
Yeah, because the predetermined path is just gone.
Exactly. But forced relocation disrupts the environmental feedback loops that keep us anxious. The sources highlight a stark environmental contrast that plays a massive psychological role in his development.
The weather.
Yes, the weather. He comes from the north, which is characterized by, cold, rainy, damp winters. He openly admits he's terrified of the cold.
Same. I totally get it.
Right. And then he arrives in Kaohsiung, and he steps into this sunny, comfortable tropical climate where, in his own words, it almost never rains.
The barometric pressure alone changes your outlook. We've all felt that, right? Moving from a gray, damp environment where you physically tense your shoulders just to walk to the bus stop.
Oh, the worst.
To a place where you can physically decompress. It reminds me of changing the gear ratio on a bicycle.
Okay, fitting analogy.
Right. When you shift to an easier gear, You aren't necessarily pedaling harder or changing who you are as a cyclist. You're changing the environmental resistance.
Right. The terrain suddenly allows you to go further on way less energy.
Exactly. That perpetual sunshine literally thaws out his perspective. And because he's no longer bracing against the cold, he finds the water. He joins the university swim team and discovers this deep affinity for being in the pool.
And he's swimming every day, building a community, honing a physical skill.
Yeah. Now, this is where the story takes a fascinating turn, because this love for the water, this secondary hobby, eventually lands him a job at the National Museum of Marine Biology and Aquarium down in Pingtung.
Which is a huge facility.
Massive. He gets hired as an aquarist, and his primary duty, diving into a massive tank to hand feed a gigantic whale shark.
Which is an incredible operational detail when you consider his background.
Right, because he studied recreation and sport.
Exactly. He does not have a degree in marine biology or oceanography or anything like that. But his sheer comfort in the water, his physical diving ability, functioned as what we'd call a bridge skill.
A bridge skill. Say more about that.
So in the modern economy, we often overvalue primary degrees and totally undervalue these bridge skills. His ability to navigate the water opened a door to a highly specialized scientific environment that his academic resume alone never could have unlocked.
That is such a good point. And I want to spend a second on the mechanics of that job, because it is wild. Feeding a whale shark isn't like, sprinkling flakes into a goldfish bowl.
Not quite.
These are filter feeders that can grow up to 40 feet long. You're diving into a massive sensory-depriving tank with a creature the size of a school bus, targeting its feeding mechanisms.
It's intimidating just thinking about it.
And he mentions this detail almost casually. He says back then, they just threw on their standard dive gear, dove in, and did the job. But he notes that today, the feeders have a much harder time.
Because of the entertainment shift.
Yeah, the industry has shifted toward commercial entertainment. So now, the divers have to wear full-on mermaid suits during the feeding shows to entertain the crowds.
That specific detail about the mermaid suits is amusing, but it also signals a broader shift, right? How scientific and cultural institutions operate these days.
Yeah, moving from pure functional maintenance to theatrical consumer experiences.
Precisely. But if we look at Yu-quan's broader life trajectory during this period, there's a clear behavioral pattern emerging. I would categorize it as the psychology of following the pull.
Following the pull, meaning he wasn't forcing a specific outcome.
Exactly. Because the sources show he definitely didn't have a rigid 10-year master plan. He actually tried to leave multiple times.
Yeah, on 2 or 3 separate occasions, right?
Ugh.
As a job or a degree program ended, he made the conscious decision to move back north to Taipei.
He would think, all right, the southern chapter is over, time to return to the center of the economy.
But he never actually boards the train back.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
He remained radically open to serendipity, which is a highly underrated career strategy, honestly. At every single turning point, right when he's mentally prepared to pack his bags, a new opportunity in the South just presents itself.
Like the bike company.
Right. A friend tells him about an opening at a major bicycle brand in Pingtung. He takes the interview, gets the job, and stays.
And then years later, he feels he's hit a professional ceiling in that role, so he decides to go to grad school to retool.
And finishes the degree,
Yeah.
and again assumes he's heading north.
But immediately, a carbon fiber wheel factory in the South starts hiring. He applies, gets the position, and stays again.
It's as if the southern geography had its own gravitational pull, and instead of fighting it with his ego, instead of saying, no, my blueprint says I must be a Taipei executive by age 30, he allowed his network and the environment to dictate his next move.
Yeah, he allowed himself to be pulled by the present reality rather than pushed by his past expectations.
Yeah.
Love that phrasing.
And that adaptability, that willingness to pivot, kept him embedded in the southern bicycle industry for over 2 decades.
Which brings us to the setting for his eventual entrepreneurial leap, because this is the key turning point in his life story. When he finally decides to start his own business, he doesn't sign a lease for a sterile concrete storefront in a modern strip mall.
No, he definitely doesn't.
He sets up shop in Huangpu New Village in Kaohsiung.
And that location is not incidental. It is the fundamental catalyst for his entire business model. This is a neighborhood steeped in profound geopolitical history.
Yeah, we need to provide the context here for our listeners because the source material dives deep into this. This village is over 80 years old.
It's ancient by modern city standards.
Right. It was originally constructed during the Japanese colonial period as a military base for the Japanese army. It was designed with very specific Japanese architectural principles.
Lots of wood, raised floors, sliding doors.
Exactly. Then, after World War II and the Chinese Civil War, the nationalist forces retreated to Taiwan. Specifically, troops under the command of Sun Li-jen took over this exact base.
Sun Li-jen, who is a highly prominent general.
Yeah, educated at the Virginia Military Institute, known for his tactical brilliance. When his forces relocated, this Japanese base was transformed into Taiwan's first-generation military dependence village.
So you had families from all over mainland China moving into these wooden Japanese structures.
Yeah, adding little brick extensions, modifying the spaces to fit their needs. It became this incredible cultural melting pot.
It's a living, physical timeline of 20th century East Asian history. And from an urban planning perspective, spaces with that much historical weight typically face one of two fates.
Oh, yeah. What are they usually?
Well, they're either bulldozed to make way for high-density modern developments, or they're evacuated, surrounded by velvet ropes, and turned into untouchable, hands-off museums.
But the Cultural Bureau in Kaohsiung utilized a completely different strategy, relying on this fascinating policy loophole called the Live to Preserve program.
Live to preserve, it's such a brilliant concept.
It is. Here's the legislative reality. These houses are roughly 80 years old. Under the local heritage laws, a structure generally needs to hit the 100-year mark to be officially classified and protected as an ancient monument.
So they're in this awkward teenage phase of historical preservation.
Yes, caught in this dangerous gray zone. They're too historically significant to tear down without massive public outcry, but technically too young to receive the government funding and legal protection of a full heritage site.
So to prevent them from rotting away while they wait 2 decades to turn 100, the government allows private citizens to move into them.
The preservation strategy is literal human habitation.
Which is highly counterintuitive to the modern preservation mindset. We are so conditioned to believe that human beings destroy historical artifacts that we wear down floors and chip paint.
That was exactly my initial thought. If I'm the government, why not just lock the doors? Treat the entire village like a time capsule.
Put a chain link fence around the perimeter.
Yeah, hire a security guard and let it sit undisturbed until the 100-year anniversary. Why introduce the chaos and wear and tear of people cooking, sleeping, and running businesses inside fragile, 80-year-old wooden architecture?
Because you have to understand the physics of historical wooden architecture, particularly in a tropical climate like southern Taiwan.
Right, the weather changes everything.
A building is not a static object. It's an organic system that requires regulation. If you lock up a wooden Japanese house in Kaohsiung, shut the windows and walk away, the high humidity essentially turns the interior into a stagnant terrarium.
Oh, wow. A terrarium.
Yes. The wood absorbs the moisture and expands. Mold spores settle and bloom across the walls. Termites move in completely undisturbed. Within a few years, the structural beams will decay completely.
So an empty museum piece just suffocates in the dark.
Precisely. Houses require human warmth, both literally and figuratively. When humans inhabit a space, they provide essential daily microscopic maintenance just by living their lives.
Just by being there.
Yeah. We open doors and windows, which creates cross-ventilation and flushes out the damp air. Our bodies and our cooking generate ambient heat that dries out the interior wood.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And think about maintenance. If a ceramic roof tile slips during a typhoon and a tiny leak starts in the ceiling, a human resident notices the drip on their floor immediately.
And they patch it that afternoon.
Exactly. An empty, locked museum won't catch that leak until the annual inspection, and by then the entire roof structure has rotted through.
That is fascinating. By living in it, you are actively keeping the structure alive. It's this beautiful symbiotic relationship.
But the contract for the Live to Preserve program is incredibly strict. You're not handed a free house to just remodel however you want.
Right. The rules dictate that you must physically reside in the space. You cannot use it merely as a commercial storage unit or a pop-up shop you visit on weekends.
You have to sleep there.
And most critically, you are forbidden from altering the main structure or the exterior appearance. You are acting as a custodian.
And stepping into that custodial role brings some very visceral physical reminders of the past. The original interviewer notes that when you walk through the doorways of Yu-quan's home, there's less than half a fist of clearance above your head.
Yes. It forces a physiological response.
Yeah.
You have to physically bow your head to navigate the space.
Which is a direct reflection of human biology 80 years ago. Nutritional standards and average heights were significantly different when the Japanese military designed those frames.
It's a constant tactile reminder that you're a guest in another era. The ceilings are another great example.
Oh, the false ceilings.
Yeah, the space has a flat, modern-looking ceiling, but if you look above it, the original high-pitched wooden roof structure is completely intact, just hidden away in the dark.
But the most brilliant architectural feature they discuss is the Japanese modular spatial design.
I love this part. Yu-quan explains that the entire living area is essentially just 4 relatively small rooms.
And in a Western architectural paradigm, 4 small rooms would feel incredibly claustrophobic because we assign rigid, single functions to our spaces.
Right. A bedroom contains a massive bed and can only be used for sleeping. A dining room contains a heavy table and is only used for eating.
Western architecture is generally very static, but traditional Japanese architecture is defined by functional agility.
Yes. Yu-quan describes how these 4 rooms are completely dynamic. At night, you slide open the built-in cabinets, the oshir, you pull out the futons, unroll them on the floor, and the space is a bedroom.
And then in the morning,
You wake up, fold the bedding away, slide the cabinet shut, and pull out a low table. Suddenly, that exact same square footage is a living room, a dining area, or a space to host clients. It's a transformer house.
the physical environment demands that you remain flexible, uncluttered, and highly adaptable.
And that modular, adaptable environment perfectly mirrors the precise business mindset Yu-quan requires for his next move.
It really does. He's operating inside a space designed for extreme efficiency and low overhead.
Which is the exact blueprint he uses to launch his startup. So let's dive into the economics of that startup, because this is where the conventional business playbook gets completely shredded.
This is the zero capital part.
Yes. Yu-quan leaves his corporate jobs in the bicycle manufacturing industry and decides to launch a dual-purpose venture right inside his historic home. He starts a specialized bicycle studio and a bed and breakfast called the Sunrise Cycling Station.
And the capital he uses to start this,
5,000 new Taiwan dollars.
which, for context, is roughly 150 to 160 US dollars.
It's basically a rounding error in a standard business plan, right?
It's practically zero capital. It's unheard of.
He pays the government fee for his commercial business registration, and that is it. The sources note he had a negligible amount of personal savings, meaning he had 0 operating reserve.
No financial runway, no safety net.
Now, I have to play the skeptic here on behalf of anyone who has ever looked at a business loan. He's a married man. He's not a 21-year-old kid sleeping on a friend's couch with nothing to lose.
The stakes are real.
Very real. Starting a business relying entirely on immediate cash flow from day one without 6 months of operating expenses in the bank seems incredibly risky. How does he justify that level of exposure?
Well, if you evaluate his decision through the lens of a traditional product-based startup, it looks completely financially irresponsible.
Like madness.
Exactly. But we have to distinguish between a resource-heavy startup and a skill-leveraged startup. This is a crucial turning point in analyzing his entrepreneurial journey.
Okay, break that down for us.
A traditional resource startup requires massive upfront capital. Imagine a standard retail bike shop in Taipei. You have to sign a multi-year commercial lease in a high-traffic area requiring first and last month's rent plus a deposit.
Right, which is thousands of dollars right there.
Then you have to purchase hundreds of thousands of dollars in physical inventory. Bicycles, helmets, apparel, components, just to stock the floor before a single customer even walks through the door.
Yeah, if the market turns, you are trapped with massive debt and depreciating physical assets. You are heavily leveraged before you even prove your concept.
But Yu-quan is running a skill-based, service-oriented model. His wife supported the leap because they possessed 2 vital, non-cash assets that systematically de-risked the venture.
The first being the space itself, right?
Yes. First, the physical space. Because of the Live to Preserve policy, their residential home legally doubled as their commercial space. They completely eliminated the crushing overhead of a separate commercial lease.
So the geographic and policy arbitrage essentially subsidized the foundational cost of his business.
Exactly. And second, he brought an unlosable technical skill. He had spent 2 decades in the bicycle industry, mastering mechanics, carbon fiber manufacturing, and rider biomechanics.
Right. He wasn't gambling on buying cheap inventory and trying to sell it at a markup.
No, he was monetizing his own sweat equity, his time, and his deep expertise. When your primary product is your own knowledge, your risk profile drops dramatically.
Because if nobody booked a service in the first week, He didn't lose thousands of dollars in overhead.
He only lost his time.
That distinction completely reframes the 5,000 NTD. It isn't a reckless gamble. It's the ultimate lean startup. He minimized his fixed costs to near zero, allowing him to survive on minimal revenue.
It's brilliant in its simplicity.
It really is.
Yeah.
And part of that early lean startup is his bike studio, which has this deeply specific and wonderfully humbling origin story for its name, 5 a.m. Studio.
Oh, this story, it's so good.
When I read this part of the transcript, I felt an acute sense of guilt about my own alarm clock habits, let me tell you.
It's a profound testament to discipline, honestly, and the lengths people will go to maintain a sense of community amidst all the pressures of adulthood.
Yeah. The name comes from his time living and working in Pingtung. He was part of a cycling group, but these were not young, sponsored athletes with infinite free time.
No, these were 40-something men. Uncles, as he affectionately calls them.
Uncles. These were guys carrying the heavy burdens of middle age, demanding full-time careers, mortgages, and young families. Because their weekends were entirely consumed by family obligations and chores, they couldn't do the traditional Saturday morning group ride.
So they engineered a brutal but effective workaround.
Brutal is the right word. Every single day, Monday through Friday, they would wake up at 4 a.m.
4 a.m. every day.
They'd meet in the dark at 5 a.m., ride a massive high-intensity loop together, and then return home in time to shower, eat breakfast with their kids, and head in the office.
The physiological commitment required to maintain that schedule is staggering. You are fighting human biology and cortisol levels every single morning. But it highlights how deeply they needed that community and that physical release. It was a daily rebellion against the constraints of their responsibilities.
And he maintained that grueling schedule for 4 or 5 years. So when he registers his business, 5 a.m. Studio isn't just a catchy brand. It's a tribute to that specific era of discipline, shared suffering, and camaraderie.
And there is a brilliant visual element that ties this all together, too.
The logo, yes. It's one of those design moments you just can't force. He realizes later that if you look at the typography of the letters A and M in 5 a.m., there are 3 distinct visual peaks, the top of the A and the 2 points of the M.
And his physical studio is located across a structure of historic houses that feature 3 distinct pitched triangular Japanese roofs.
The typography of his past discipline perfectly mirrors the skyline of his present reality. It's almost poetic.
But as aesthetically perfect as that is, the operational reality of running the business hit a massive wall almost immediately.
Yeah, because shortly after he pays his 5,000 NTD and opens his doors, a global pandemic completely freezes the economy.
Which plunges him directly into the universal trial of entrepreneurship, the starvation phase.
The starvation phase. He's incredibly transparent about this in the interview, too. He admits that the thought of quitting was a constant daily presence.
It had to be. The pandemic destroyed domestic travel, which severely impacted his bed and breakfast bookings.
And his service income was wildly unstable. He was sitting in this historic house, staring at his zero capital decision, wondering if he had made a catastrophic error in judgment.
Which is such a dark place to be mentally.
But what ultimately prevented him from folding wasn't like a sudden government grant or a viral marketing campaign. It was a psychological pivot brought on by networking with his competitors.
And this is a critical mechanism for survival in isolation. When you're suffering alone in a new venture, your brain naturally attributes that suffering to personal incompetence.
Oh, 100%. You look at your empty booking calendar and you tell yourself, I am failing because my business model is flawed, or because I'm simply not good enough to pull this off.
You internalize the lack of revenue as a lack of personal worth.
Exactly. But Yu-quan started talking to other independent bicycle shop owners across the country, and he discovered a systemic pattern.
Every single one of them, even the shop owners who were now highly successful and financially secure, had a vivid, painful story about starving during their first year or 2 in business.
He realized the starvation phase wasn't a bug in his specific business plan. It was a required feature of the industry. It was a universal rite of passage.
The normalization of struggle is such a powerful psychological tool. By realizing that everyone starves in the beginning, he externalized the blame.
It shifted his internal narrative.
Yes, from I am failing to I am simply paying my dues, undergoing the exact same stress test that every successful person in this field had to endure.
That shared narrative didn't put money in his bank account, but it provided the necessary psychological armor to hold the line and not abandon the project.
Right, to overcome that massive entrepreneurial challenge.
So he holds the line, he endures the pandemic, he survives the worst of the starvation phase. But this brings us to a crucial question about how we define success. Because Yu-quan openly admits in the source material that he is not pulling in massive life-changing profits.
He isn't getting rich.
Not at all. So if he wasn't making a huge financial return, why didn't he just close up shop and go back to a comfortable, predictable corporate salary?
Because he fundamentally recalibrated what a green light looked like for his life.
A green light.
Yeah. In a venture-backed startup, the green light is exponential, hockey stick growth. You need to 10x your revenue. But in a lifestyle-integrated zero-capital business, the metric for success is entirely different.
He looked at his financial statements, and while the absolute numbers were modest, the trajectory was incredibly consistent.
There was steady, incremental growth. For a business model with virtually zero overhead, steady progress is the ultimate validation. He didn't need to go viral. He just needed empirical proof that next month would be slightly better than last month.
And it becomes clear that the primary currency he was accumulating wasn't purely financial. It was the deep, tangible fulfillment of the work itself.
We see this vividly in the specific service he provides at 5 a.m. Studio, professional bike fitting.
Now, we need to explain what this actually entails, because bike fitting is not just, raising the saddle so your toes can touch the ground.
No, it is a highly complex biomechanical process. It is the science of marrying human anatomy to a static mechanical machine.
Right, you're dealing with millimeters of adjustment. Yu-quan is measuring a rider's flexibility, their pelvic rotation, their leg length discrepancies.
He's adjusting the Q factor of the pedals, the stack and reach of the handlebars, the exact angle of the saddle.
And the impact of these millimeter changes is profound. The original interviewer, John, actually provides a first-hand account of this. John and his wife went to Yu-quan for a fitting.
And what was her experience prior to the fitting?
Well, prior to this, John's wife was experiencing severe, constant back and waist pain every time she rode. It was making the hobby completely miserable for her.
Which is incredibly common, actually. When a rider's pelvis is rotated incorrectly on the saddle, it forces the lumbar spine into unnatural flexion. Over a 2-hour ride, that sustained compression causes severe pain.
Exactly. But Yu-quan analyzes her posture on the bike, completely recalibrates her setup, and the pain vanishes entirely. She can ride comfortably again.
That's amazing.
And when Yu-quan is asked about this, he says his greatest satisfaction, the thing that keeps him going, is when a client returns and says, I can finally ride without pain, or because of your adjustments, I just broke my personal speed record on my favorite route.
He has taken a mechanical job turning wrenches, tightening bolts, measuring angles, and reframed it entirely as a helping profession.
A helping profession.
Yeah, we typically reserve that term for physical therapists, counselors, or nurses. But Yu-quan is utilizing his technical expertise to directly alleviate physical suffering and empower his clients to achieve their personal goals.
When your daily labor is rooted in improving the physical quality of someone else's life, the emotional return on investment is massive.
That fulfillment is the bridge that sustains an entrepreneur through the lean financial periods.
He isn't just fixing bicycles. He's repairing people's relationships with their own bodies. And that profound sense of connection, that desire to host and help, extends seamlessly into the other half of his business, the Sunrise Cycling Station Bed and Breakfast.
Right, the B&B side of things.
Now, obviously with a name like that, the intended target demographic is backpackers and touring cyclists.
A very specific transient consumer base.
But the reality of who actually books a stay in an 80-year-old military village is wonderfully unpredictable. The sources share a specific instance where, instead of tired cyclists, a group of 12 Japanese artists arrive.
12 artists?
Yeah. They were participating in a cultural exchange program initiated by another resident in the village. So suddenly, Yu-quan is hosting a dozen international artists in his Japanese-built home, having deep conversations about art, historical preservation, and cultural operations.
It's a collision of demographics that you simply cannot forecast on a spreadsheet.
And the emotional weight of these interactions is striking. Yu-quan talks about how, because the physical space requires him to be a deeply engaged host, he ends up chatting with these guests every single day.
They share meals, they talk in the evenings.
Yeah. And he admits that after just 3 or 4 days, when it's time for the guest to pack up and check out, he experiences a genuine, deep melancholy. He feels a real reluctance to say goodbye, even though they both acknowledge they were strangers, less than a week ago.
This touches on a fascinating sociological phenomenon within the hospitality industry, particularly in these intimate, culturally saturated environments. We can think of it as accelerated intimacy.
Accelerated intimacy. I want to dig into the mechanics of that. How does a space accelerate a relationship?
Well, consider the architecture of a standard corporate hotel. The entire environment is engineered to be frictionless and anonymous.
Right.
You use a key card, you walk down a silent hallway, you enter a soundproof room. You never have to speak to another human being if you don't want to. The architecture protects your isolation.
It's designed for maximum privacy and minimal friction.
But when you stay in a live-to-preserve village in a historic wooden home with paper-thin walls, low door frames, and an engaged host who actually lives in the adjacent room, the friction of the space demands engagement.
You can't just hide away.
No, you're sharing a bathroom. You hear every footstep on the wooden floorboards. You are collectively navigating the quirks of an 80-year-old structure.
That makes total sense.
That physical proximity and shared navigation strips away the superficial transactional barrier between tourist and host. The architecture acts as an emotional catalyst, forcing a very raw, very real human connection in a highly compressed time frame.
The space won't allow you to remain anonymous. It forces you to acknowledge the humanity of the person next to you. It transforms these transient tourists into temporary yet deeply felt members of a global family.
And that melancholy Yu-quan feels when they leave. That isn't a negative emotion. That is the empirical proof that his business model is generating genuine human connection.
For an entrepreneur who started with nothing but a registration fee, that is a staggering return on investment.
Absolutely.
So taking all of these elements, we've analyzed the serendipity of the geographic slingshot, the physics of historic preservation, the zero capital mechanics, the normalization of the starvation phase, and the accelerated intimacy of the space the source material concludes, with Yu-quan offering a kind of philosophical playbook.
A playbook for who?
He provides advice for the dreamers, the drifters, and anyone standing on the edge of a major life change.
And his advice is sharply contrary to the hyper-optimized career culture we live in today.
Very much so. The interviewer asks him what advice he would give to his 20-year-old self, a kid fresh out of his mandatory military service, holding a degree, and likely looking completely lost about his future.
And what does he say?
Yu-quan's response is brilliant. He says, "You look a bit clueless, but that's a good thing. Just go surf. Don't overthink it. Every failure is just nourishment and social experience."
He is advocating for the strategic advantage of being clueless, which sounds like an oxymoron in an era where we demand data-driven certainty before making any decision.
The strategic advantage of being clueless. Break that down, because most people are terrified of looking like they don't know what they're doing.
Right, but when you hyper-analyze every potential outcome of a career move, you often induce paralysis. You demand perfect conditions before you take action.
You get stuck in planning mode.
Exactly. But a mild state of cluelessness, what Zen Buddhism might call beginner's mind, or shoshin, combined with a bias toward action, leads to rapid experiential learning.
Yu-quan didn't map out a 20-year plan to own a historic B&B.
No, he took a job feeding a whale shark. He learned carbon fiber manufacturing. He gathered data by doing rather than by theorizing.
By viewing failures not as catastrophic endpoints, but as nourishment, as essential caloric intake for his future self, he removed the fear that typically prevents people from starting.
It completely neutralizes the sting of making a mistake. It's just data collection.
But while he encourages this free-spirited, open-minded approach, he is relentlessly pragmatic when it comes to the economic reality of the Southern drifter lifestyle.
The reality check.
Yes. For any listeners sitting in a high-cost, high-stress northern city, daydreaming about moving to a sunny, relaxed southern beach town, Yu-quan provides a very necessary reality check.
He shatters the prevailing geographic myth that moving to a secondary city solves all your financial stress.
He acknowledges that the weather is fantastic and the pace of life is vastly superior. But he explicitly highlights two harsh truths about the local economy.
First truth.
First, contrary to popular belief in the North, the daily cost of living in the South is not drastically lower. A bowl of noodles or a tank of gas costs essentially the same. The national economic baseline applies everywhere.
Right. Inflation is inflation.
And second, and more importantly, the traditional corporate job opportunities and the corresponding salary ceilings are significantly lower than in Taipei.
This is the critical dilemma of geographic arbitrage. You cannot simply relocate for the sunshine and expect the local corporate infrastructure to hand you a high-paying salary that sustains your northern spending habits. The local economy is not designed to support that.
So if the local jobs don't pay enough, and the cost of living isn't actually that cheap, how do you make the Southern drifter lifestyle mathematically viable?
You have to bring your own leverage.
Leverage.
Yes. The required strategy is that you must possess a highly specialized, geographically independent skill. Yu-quan succeeded not because he competed for a mid-level management job in a local Kaohsiung firm, but because he brought a portable, highly refined skilled professional biomechanical bike fitting.
And he deployed it within a heavily subsidized, low-overhead physical environment.
Exactly. If you want the lifestyle benefits of a secondary market, you must decouple your revenue generation from the constraints of the local job market. You have to become your own microeconomy.
You have to carry your value in your hands, in your head, not in your resume. And that logic leads perfectly into his final piece of advice for anyone standing on the precipice of starting a venture.
And this is the big push.
Yeah, he says, look, if you have the core idea and you possess most of the required resources, even if that resource is just your own technical skill and a borrowed space, you just have to execute. And he delivers this fascinating axiom. Money problems are easy. Human problems are hard.
Money problems are easy. Human problems are hard. That is the incredibly dense, hard-won wisdom of someone who has actually survived the trenches of small business ownership.
So when he says money problems are easy, he obviously doesn't mean they are painless, but he must mean they are binary, right? They are logical. It is math.
Right. If revenue drops, you can pull a lever. You cut your marketing budget, you eat cheaper food, you negotiate a bill, you take a side job. There is a mathematical formula to solve a cash flow crisis.
But human problems, those don't have formulas.
Exactly. Human problems are ambiguous, emotional, and highly volatile. How do you manage the crushing anxiety of the starvation phase without projecting it onto your spouse?
Oof, yeah. That's hard.
How do you gently recalibrate the expectations of a demanding client who is in physical pain? How do you navigate the cultural nuances of hosting 12 foreign artists in your living room? Those require immense emotional intelligence and stamina.
So Yu-quan's point is that if you possess the resilience to handle the complex human elements of entrepreneurship, the binary math of the money problems will eventually sort itself out.
The math will follow the resilience.
And his final warning to the listener is sharp and unambiguous. If you spend your life sitting around constantly saying, I want to try this, I want to start that, but you never actually cross the threshold and take the physical risk, you're guaranteeing your status as an employee for life.
At some point, you have to stop theorizing, pay the 5,000 NTD, and register the business.
What an incredible arc we've traced today. From a kid bombing a standardized test and accidentally finding his way south, to diving with filter feeders,
To leveraging the physics of a live-to-preserve wooden house, to launching a zero-capital business.
surviving the systemic starvation phase of the pandemic, and ultimately building a global network of deep human connections through the sheer power of biomechanics and hospitality. It is a masterclass in extreme adaptability.
And the unique ability to see immense value in spaces and opportunities that others view as decay or failure.
It really is. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to turn it over to you. What is the final provocative thought our listeners should be chewing on as they go about their day?
Let's return to the mechanics of that brilliant live-to-preserve policy. The fundamental premise is that a historic structure needs a human being to move in, open the windows, and generate warmth just to keep the wood from rotting away in the dark.
Right.
I want you to take that architectural concept and apply it internally to your own life.
Oh.
What if we stopped viewing our careers and our lives as massive, stressful skyscrapers that we have to painstakingly build from scratch with immense capital?
Wow, okay.
What if instead we viewed our lives as our own personal live-to-preserve projects?
Exploring the abandoned architecture of your own potential.
Exactly. I want you to ask yourself, what old skills, what forgotten passions or past experiences like a childhood love for the water or a forgotten habit of waking up at 5 a.m. are currently sitting dormant inside of you?
What bridge skills have you locked away because they didn't fit your primary architectural blueprint?
What is sitting in the dark right now, just waiting for you to move back in, turn the lights on, and bring it back to life?
That is an incredible challenge to leave on. Stop building from scratch and go turn the lights back on in those forgotten rooms of your own life. Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive into Yu-quan's journey. Keep exploring, keep maintaining your own historic spaces, and we will catch you on the next one.